Okay, so now I think I'm going to talk a bit about the main areas where data analytics gives you a toolkit. So if you think about the role of product managers, when you're creating a product, a website, or page, typically you're expected to play either one of these three games or multiple games. And I call them games because, it's basically something that you need to win from the management's perspective, right? So there's an attention game. Attention game is about like, okay, if you're a site where you want people to come and generate impressions and view things. So typically, if you're a news site, a news kind of website, attention is the biggest thing. Or in an entertainment website, the attention is the biggest thing. The second type of game is the transaction game. So if you're selling something on the site, your management wants you to win the game of transactions. Like, how do you convert people and make them buy things? And then the third game is the productivity game, which can basically happen in both attention and transaction, which is about, how efficient are you once people come to the site, how efficiently can you make them do things that you want them to do, right? Without, very high costs. So typically you'll probably play more than one of these games in your job. And you need different kinds of metrics for each of these games, right? So when it comes to attention game, there are these input metrics that are much more important. That is, okay, how much traffic is coming to the site? That's an input metric. And I'll talk a bit more about input metrics and output metrics in a second. But the inbound metrics, if, okay, there's a marketing team that's spending money and getting people to your site, you will be paying more attention to that because that will help you figure out how to do well there. And typically with attention metrics, people need information very fast. So if you launch a site or a feature, data will start getting generated very quickly, literally in the matter of minutes or hours. And your management may also expect you to start publishing reports pretty quickly. So it's a very fast-paced game, attention metrics. The next one is transaction metrics. That one is a bit of a slower game. It needs more time and more planning in terms of like, how do you collect the data and how do you then analyze and report it? But that is really focused around what is the output or outcome that your site generates. Typically, it is a sale or a revenue that comes from your site, right? So that is, and typically, when you launch a site, an e-commerce site, what we see at eBay is that it takes time for people to start kind of getting used to the site, spending time on the site, and then they start buying things, right? So you won't get results immediately like for attention metrics. So you have to be able to explain this to your management that, look, these kind of metrics, the transaction metrics are different in nature than attention metrics, and you need to wait till you get results. Otherwise, if you give them some premature results, they will reach some premature conclusions, and that won't be a good outcome for anybody, right? So that's the transaction metrics. And the third one is the productivity metrics. There's a really important, I think, for both you as a product manager and for the company. But there, what you need to do is to work with other departments as well, because it is really about, okay, somebody comes from somewhere else to your site, they go through your site, and then they go somewhere else. And the productivity metrics are going to measure, okay, how efficiently they move through this pipeline, right? Or funnel. The common word many of you may have heard in your companies is funnel. So productivity metrics are a lot about how efficient is your funnel, right? How much effort does it take to move people from stage 1 to stage 2 to stage 3 to stage 4? And these kind of metrics require data that you may not completely own yourself. You may have to work with other departments, get the data from them before you can get the end-to-end view on productivity metrics. I mean, I have been amazed even within my own company or other companies that I've worked with or talked to, that sometimes just because different departments don't talk to each other very well, getting productivity metrics can be very difficult for a PM. But that's where the PM has to put in that extra effort. So yeah. Okay, and then One thing on the sidebar I've put is planning, monitoring, and evaluating, right? All of these metrics, you need to first plan for them, like what are the right metrics, how frequently you'll measure them, how fast you'll measure them. Then you need to keep monitoring them using your dashboards. And then at a certain point of time, you need to do an evaluation of whether you have really won the game or you have not won the game, right? So it's a three-stage process. You can't just jump straight to evaluation. You need to plan, you need to monitor, and only then you can evaluate whether you were successful at getting attention, getting transactions, or making your site productive. Okay. So let's see. I think here I had yes, I had I think one. I had one poll here as well. Rama, if you want to just flash the question. Yeah, in your organization, which area are you as PM focusing on most often? Now that I've explained to you what I mean by these three types of games, would love to know. I've given you examples, right? So do you focus a lot on attention? Do you focus more on transaction? Do you focus more on productivity type metrics? And I know all of you might be from different types of organizations. So just think from your perspective. And yeah, once we get a result, then we'll move on. Okay, it's pretty equally divided. So yeah, that kind of makes sense because different types of companies, different types of metrics are very important. And this shows probably the diversity of the audience in terms of what you focus on. Great, thank you. Okay, so let's keep moving. So let's talk a bit about tools in the toolkit and how do you use the right ones at the right time. Okay, so typically, there's a sequence to things. So let's kind of start with product planning stage when you're just like, just before you're ready to kind of launch the product in a bigger way. So the most common techniques we use at eBay and I've used at Microsoft is various kinds of testing. And there's multiple kinds of testing. I don't want to sort of go through a textbook version here, but there's something called smoke testing, which is done on a very small scale, on a very small percentage of your total traffic. So most of your traffic will not see this new feature or new site, but only a small fraction where you just kind of make sure that, okay, nothing is broken, the site is working okay, people are able to move through it. You're not really focusing on end objectives, but it's something you do before you start exposing more of your site traffic to the new features. Then comes A/B testing, which is a much more bold way to test out your product. So you could have 20% of your site exposed to the new features and 80% is still seeing the old features. You start with 20% and then you can slowly keep increasing from 20 to 30 to 40 and onwards, right? And until you kind of completely open the whole site to the new feature. So that's another way. Some companies, we don't do this at eBay for various reasons, but some companies do what is called multivariate testing, which is instead of just testing two versions, control versus A and B, control versus the new, you may actually have multiple versions being tested in parallel, control plus treated 1, treated 2, treated 3, and so on and so forth. And that is a much more complex design, but yeah, for some companies that is important to do. So this is typically done at the time of product planning and soft launch. You need to kind of make sure that you have the right kind of data you're looking at to ensure that you're getting the right feedback about, hey, this product has no major problems, no major serious issues, and something that if you launch, it will not be a disaster. It will not be a really bad user experience. And so on, right? And you can obviously also take a read on the profitability metrics as you keep on increasing the number of people you expose. The next stage where data is important and the important tool you use is dashboards and signal detection. And typically, I don't see enough people use signal detection in the industry. It's really important. I'll tell you why. So dashboards will give you a variety of metrics that you can keep looking at and keep watching. Okay. But what happens is many times you as a product manager, you're seeing the fluctuation in the metric or the movement. You don't know if that movement is within random error or is it a real meaningful change in behavior of the user, right? And that is where signal detection comes in. So you can apply some sophisticated statistical techniques to figure out if the movement in the metrics you're seeing is real change or is it within what is called noise, right? So there's something called signal to noise ratio. How good is your signal to noise ratio? And this becomes very important when you're talking to your management, because if your management has the access to the same dashboards and they see some fluctuation, they may come running to you. And this happens to us at all times in my company as well. Hey, what happened here? Is the site broken? Is the customer really upset? And if you have good signal detection, you can tell them that, no, this is within noise. Don't worry. Let's keep tracking. Or if it is real, then you can take immediate action to see what you can do to reduce the problem, right? So that's another very important tool in the toolkit, having a good dashboard and having a good signal detection. The third one I think I'll talk about is doing what is called multivariate pre and post analysis. So, okay, before you launch the new features, how the customer was behaving. Then after you launch the new features, how the customer or user is behaving. You compare the two across multiple variables. And then you try to understand, like, did you get an incremental benefit by launching this product, or you did not get incremental benefit? And that also requires statistical analysis because there's multiple variables involved, and you need to make sure that whatever change you are seeing is a real change in behavior, right? And this can be used for a post-mortem type ROI analysis that senior executives want. Like they feel that, okay, we spent all this money on this new product launch. Okay, what am I getting from it, right? So that is another important type of tool that you need to master as a PM to tell your story in a clear way. The last one I think is really important, but again, some PMs use it well, some have not yet discovered it. And that is the use of machine learning and the feedback mining. So what happens in most websites or apps nowadays is that as customers are interacting with the site or the app, they are also, putting some comments, they're putting some feedback, they are maybe interacting with, if it's the e-commerce marketplace, they might be interacting with the sellers, they might be interacting with your company, saying things, and then you are telling them something, etc. So you can actually analyze this data using machine learning or natural language processing, and it helps you go beyond pure numbers, because everything I talked about so far is quantitative. It's about numbers. But then when you do mining of the feedback that your customers are giving you, you can actually go beyond numbers and also measure the sentiments of your customers, which tell you a different part of the story about how the site is performing or how your product is performing. So this is another very important tool in the toolkit that I would like all product managers to think about learning. You don't need to be an expert, but you need to be able to work with a data scientist who can help you get this insight. Okay, so these are the four big ones.